In the daughter's eyes, they were perfect parents. In the eyes of relatives and colleagues, they were a couple with a beautiful love, supporting each other through thick and thin. But only they themselves knew that this marriage had long developed cracks. It all started when she received an anonymous video. Tristan came back carrying grocery bags from the supermarket. Upon opening the door, he saw 2 pairs of shoes, a pair of off-white women's shoes, one standing upright, and the other lazily tilted. The other pair was a young-looking pair of men's sneakers, white and green clash of colors, puffy high tops, even in the midst of summer, not afraid of smelling bad. Tristan didn't even bend down, he extended both arms forward, nonchalantly throwing the shopping bags into the room. Various boxed, bagged, and bottled foods and drinks squeezed together as they landed. Green apples, as if in protest, jumped out of the bag, rolling several feet away. The aluminum cans made a loud clang as if trying to break through the floor tiles. The big boy in the living room seemed startled. As he was walking out, Tristan happened to kick off his shoes and entered. The two met at the entrance, both with broad shoulders and long legs, one exuding youthful vigor, the other with a commanding presence. Just as Tristan was about to speak, Mackenzie walked over, raised her hand, and pulled his arm heavily. The young man turned his face and smiled at her. "Sis, I'll leave now." In the kitchen, Tristan rearranged the contents of the refrigerator with a resounding noise. Mackenzie, holding a glass of water, leaned against the door frame, taunting, "What's gotten into you?" He glanced at her. "I may not care about what you do outside, but can you not bring men home?" Mackenzie laughed. "I did bring one home. What are you going to do about it?" Tristan took 2 steps and came right in front of her, shaking a bunch of asparagus in his hand. "Mackenzie, how did you become like this? Can't you have a little decency?" Mackenzie tilted her head up. He looked at her, with a fair and tight face, lips red and teeth white, and annoyingly some money in her hand. "It's not surprising to attract a young man," she said softly. "Who made me like this? Why should I care about face?" He suddenly felt short of breath and softened his tone. "I have to go pick up Piper later. Can you not stir up trouble?" She kicked him with a soft-soled slipper, not painful at all. "It used to be a bit flirtatious. Who's stirring up trouble?" He lowered his eyebrows. "It's me, okay? Is that enough?" Perhaps the argument wasn't satisfying. Mackenzie sat on the sofa, still sulking. Tristan came out of the kitchen, wiping his hands with tissues, and asked, "What does that boy do? Can you handle someone so young?" Mackenzie rolled her eyes. "None of your business." Tristan, annoyed, threw the wet paper ball at her. His whole person also leaned over. "Mackenzie, how did you become like this? Can't you have a little decency?" Mackenzie pushed him away. "Don't use your 800-year-old tricks to disgust me. Did you remember to review your homework? Nerd." On the way to pick up their daughter from school, the two were still holding their breath. He said, "If you're lonely, find someone properly, don't degrade yourself." She looked out the window, asking in a bad tone, "Why find someone?" Tristan took 2 deep breaths and said, "I delayed you. Find someone and live a good life. Live a good life once, and it's ruined for a lifetime. Why waste this ruined life on someone else?" Tristan's throat tightened. "Mackenzie." Mackenzie immediately got angry. "Can you stop talking? If you want to find someone, go ahead, but I'll tell you, before Piper goes to college, you better not remarry. Otherwise, you won't have a good life, and I won't spare you." "Fine. I'll leave it here. If I see you bring someone home again, don't blame me for being rude." "Stubborn?" "Stubborn." After a while, she spoke again. "The air conditioner repairman has finished fixing it and went downstairs, only to realize he dropped the key inside the house." Tristan's mood eased a bit. "Is that so? Even repairmen are so clean and handsome nowadays." "Yeah, temptations are everywhere. Anything can happen in the blink of an eye." Tristan's molars clenched again. "Can you speak properly?" She blinked innocently. "What did I say?" Tristan ground his teeth for a while, but then asked, "Do you want some water?" Her apology came suddenly. "I'm sorry. It's me who should apologize to you." His annoyance immediately deflated like a punctured balloon. His voice was light, tinged with self-mockery and a bit of pitiful tone. "Sometimes I think, maybe I should cherish your resentment towards me. If even this emotion is gone, then there really is nothing left. Isn't it?" Mackenzie remained silent, looking out the window. Many parents were picking up their children. The line of cars extended far away. A silly thought popped into her head. How many couples gave birth to so many young boys and girls? How many still loved each other? How many seemed harmonious but were actually distant? How many marriages endured, and how many fell apart? Their daughter, Piper, was 13 years old. Last year, she entered this prestigious boarding school known for its academic achievements, coming home only 2 days a week. Seeing Piper, with her backpack, bounding out happily, the divorced couple, who were just quarreling, instantly transformed into adept actors. Mackenzie linked her arm with Tristan's, shaking their hands vigorously as their daughter approached. Piper came running, joining her parents, hands on each of their arms, chatting incessantly. On the way back, the mother and daughter sat in the back seat. Piper leaned against her mother, coquettishly saying, "I miss home so much, and I miss both of you." Mackenzie stroked her daughter's hair and said tenderly, "Mom and Dad miss you too." Watching the similar features of the mother and daughter, Tristan's eyes welled up with a hint of sorrow. He quickly averted his gaze from the rearview mirror. On Sunday afternoon, after dropping Piper back at school, Mackenzie got off the car midway. Tristan leaned out of the car window, asking her, "Have you found a job?" Mackenzie shook her head. "I hope to have time on weekends to be with Piper. It's not easy to find a job like that." "Don't worry, I'll figure something out for you." "No need. I can't rely on you for everything." His fingernails unconsciously scratched the steering wheel. "It's not you relying on me, it's me always relying on you." Mackenzie didn't say anything, she walked away. But after a few steps, he called her again, saying, "Hold on to the money in your hands. In the current market conditions, don't make blind investments." She laughed. "You really care, don't you?" At 37, Mackenzie's resume was blank, making it challenging to find a job. However, she applied everywhere, landing a job as a jewelry store attendant. Due to lack of experience and being overly naive, she didn't sell anything for days. Even the potential customers she warmly received were snatched by her colleagues. That night, she went out for dinner with friends, drank a bit, and when she came out, the wind made her slightly tipsy. Instead of turning left towards her rented house, she habitually turned right. Through the floor-to-ceiling window of a familiar dumpling restaurant at the street corner, she saw a man sitting by the window. Her steps paused. She thought, "This person looks a lot like Tristan. Like him, but not quite." This person had his head down, a slightly hunched back, and in front of him were dumplings, a small plate of vegetables, and a bottle of soda. Tristan was different. He always had a hearty laugh, full of vitality. At 39, his biceps, when flexed, resembled little squirrels jumping around. His back was always straight. He rarely appeared with a lowered brow or a hunched back. Was it really him? Mackenzie felt a bit dizzy, so she walked a couple of steps closer through the glass. The external air conditioning unit was emitting hot air, making it difficult for her to see the man's features clearly. Maybe she lingered for too long. The man outside noticed her silhouette and turned his face. Mackenzie's slight drunkenness was instantly dispelled, and she turned and ran. She ran in the wrong direction, getting more lost as she went. When she realized, she turned around, only to collide with him. "It's so late. Why are you still outside?" he asked. "Let's go home." "It's so late. Why are you just having dinner?" The previous tipsy feeling seemed to return. She said, "Sorry for the disturbance, goodbye." She bypassed him and walked forward. He followed her, saying, "Mackenzie, look up at this street, see where we are." Mackenzie raised her eyes blankly, looking at the sky, the road, the buildings, and trees on the side of the road. She turned her face and smiled at him. Maple Avenue. Yes, it was Maple Avenue. Maple Avenue was wide, with a row of maple trees on each side, tall and umbrella-like, their branches almost connecting in the air. It was summer now, and the leaves of the maple trees were fresh green, sharp and thorny, rustling in the breeze. Mackenzie must have thought of something. She suddenly turned around and pushed him, then quickened her pace. He still followed silently. She watched the shadows of the two people on the ground, listened to their footsteps and heartbeats. She just ignored him. It was her signature move. Whenever she got angry, she would ignore him, and in no time, he would come to coax her with gentle words. At the apartment building entrance, he stopped and said, "You go up. In the future, try not to drink too much when you're out alone, preferably with a friend. When you're working, you'll meet all sorts of people. Don't take things to heart. If you need help, just call me anytime, any day. Like before, I'm willing to be your support in any way." Mackenzie halted. Without turning her head, she said, "Can you pick up Piper by yourself this weekend?" After receiving an affirmative answer, she added, "I'll prepare everything we need in advance. I'll go home right after work." Tristan agreed. In fact, he always looked forward to the weekly reunions of the three. In front of Piper, Mackenzie was always gentle and amiable. To avoid Piper's suspicion, she occasionally patted his arm or put her arm around his shoulder. As usual, at night, he went into one of the bedrooms to sleep. Even though after closing the door, she would turn her back, cocooned in her own blanket, he often had the illusion, in the proximity of their breaths, that many things that happened were just a dream. In many semi-conscious moments, he let his chest gently touch her back. Sometimes she would immediately pull away, sometimes not, perhaps when she was fast asleep. Once, he woke up to find her curled up in his arms, a small bundle, with the same soft and relaxed appearance as before. He wanted to kiss her but didn't dare. However, as he daydreamed, she woke up. A fleeting confusion appeared in her eyes, then it was covered by a layer of mist. They stood there in a standoff, but later, she moved, pressing her body tightly against him. Her hands clasped his back, fingertips almost digging into his flesh. But she said, "Tristan, when you're holding that woman, do you ever think of me?" Tristan felt the warmth in his body instantly cool down. When things go wrong, even drinking cold water feels like a challenge. In the third week of her new job, Mackenzie was hit by an electric bike on her way to work. The traffic police arrived quickly, followed by an ambulance. When asked for the contact information of her family, she immediately rattled off a string of numbers from memory. Tristan arrived promptly. She overheard them asking him about the relationship with the injured person. Without a moment's hesitation, he stammered, "She's my wife." Mackenzie had a fractured ankle. After being treated and lying on the hospital bed, she realized she had broken into a sweat, her forehead hair sticking together, and her underwear damp. With the blanket just covering her waist, she reached out, but it was out of reach. She had to call his name. After being a couple for many years, Tristan was talking to the doctor, but just a glance at her gesture, and he understood. He covered her with the blanket and instinctively reached out to tidy her hair. As the endless hours passed, drop by drop, Mackenzie slept fitfully, her ankle throbbing. She couldn't help but moan in pain during her half-awake moments. She was startled, dreaming of the electric bike running the red light and crashing into her. She woke up trembling with fear. Tristan, holding the hand where the four was connected, provided great comfort with his familiar scent and warmth. Mackenzie felt as if the liquid in the four had entered her head, as she looked at their intertwined hands and said, "If only time could turn back. Tristan, if time could reverse, I wouldn't let you take that job. I would rather be a shrew, preventing you from taking that job. We don't need much money, I just want our family to be together." She saw Tristan's nostrils move, and his voice was low, "I messed up our life. If you give me a chance, I will work hard to fix it. We can be like before." In the hospital, Mackenzie accepted all of Tristan's care. Why not? They had been a couple for 14 years, sharing their days, being close, and understanding each other. His chest was broad enough, his arms strong enough. Her foot was broken, her parents and brother-in-law lived far away, her daughter was studying at school. Who else could she rely on? The caregiver couldn't provide the emotional warmth, she needed his care. Moreover, he always used Piper to silence her. Whenever she threw a tantrum lying in the hospital bed, he would say, "Do you want Piper to worry about you?" Of course, she didn't want that. So, he would say, "We are Piper's parents, no matter what, we are a family, right?" She couldn't find words to refute him, only heard him say, "Mackenzie, be obedient." He took leave, so his colleagues and friends quickly visited the hospital. They chatted away, and Mackenzie just had to lean on the bed with a gentle and faint smile. He would naturally go to socialize. Occasionally, she felt trance-like. Did anything really change between them, except for an additional piece of paper? Sometimes she would imagine that if she swallowed that thorn, it might not necessarily cut her abdomen open with blood. But there's always a hidden pain. It doesn't get better. Upon discharge, he naturally drove the car back to the building of their former home. "I'm not going home," she said, adding, "I want to go back to my own home." He remained silent, placed the wheelchair in position, and then extended his arm under her armpit. Mackenzie resisted, repeating, "I want to go back to my own home." "This is your home," he looked at her, saying, "Piper will be back soon, be obedient." He continued working, hired a housekeeper to stay at home, taking care of her during the day, helping her with meals and laundry, assisting her to sit or lie down, and taking care of her at night. When Piper wasn't home, there was no reason for the divorced couple to lie on the same bed. He slept on the couch for convenience at night. One rainy night, a sudden thunderclap startled Mackenzie, who hadn't been able to sleep. She noticed him quietly entering the room. He lay down beside her without moving, breathing so lightly. When another lightning flashed across the sky, he raised his arm and placed it on the blanket in front of her. Suddenly, she spoke, "Are you scared?" He was startled, quickly withdrawing his arm. "No, I was worried you would be scared." "I'm not scared," she said softly. "I used to be scared, but I'm not anymore." His irritation surged from the depths, and he suddenly leaned up, tilting the mattress. In the instant illuminated by lightning, her eyes were moist and bright, staring directly into his. His anger strangely disappeared, and he lowered his head, pressing his forehead against hers. "Is there still a chance?" After a moment of silence, she said, "If you have needs, go find them outside. After all, you've done it before, haven't you?" He was infuriated, jumped up, and slammed into the door with a loud bang. "Mackenzie!" She heard him shout at the door, followed by a low growl like a trapped beast. He said, "What else do you want from me? I've poured out my heart to you." He said, "I made a mistake, but does that warrant death? You mock me, ridicule me, why won't you forgive me, why?" 15 years ago, at the age of 22, Mackenzie was the most beautiful girl in the entire company, with a gentle and serene temperament. On the first afternoon after Tristan was dispatched from the headquarters, he encountered Mackenzie in a white shirt at the cafeteria entrance. There was no conversation or eye contact, just a passing moment, yet he felt that no other girl could wear a white shirt so fresh and charming while exuding such a strong aura. A single encounter had left an indelible mark on his mind. It wasn't until almost the end of the workday that Tristan casually asked a colleague, "Who is the girl I saw at the cafeteria entrance during lunch?" The colleague smiled knowingly, "That's Mackenzie, she's not easy to pursue." Colleagues informed him that there were no fewer than 5 boys currently pursuing Mackenzie. Some were handsome, some came from wealthy families, and others had good jobs. Mackenzie's attitude was neither close nor distant, and it was unclear what kind of boyfriend she was looking for. According to the plan, Tristan was only supposed to work here for 3 months, and the thought of it made him feel urgent and anxious. Because he had to admit that, after becoming familiar with Mackenzie, he had a feeling of wanting to pour out his heart and soul. Her gentle gaze and mild voice lingered and swirled in his mind day and night. Was this love at first sight? He thought it might be. He didn't just want to date her, he wanted to be her husband, the kind that lasts forever. He firmly believed that, in a relationship, he always had absolute sincerity. Tristan was a child who had grown up in a small county. From a young age, he was calm, disciplined, relying on his intelligent mind, humble attitude, solid work ethic, and the willingness to invest time and energy. These qualities, when mixed together and applied to his work, were destined to shine brightly, a radiance that Mackenzie wouldn't fail to notice. So, rather than saying that one pursued the other, it's more accurate to say that at a certain moment, their eyes and souls intertwined. 3 months passed quickly, and on the night before their separation, they shared their first embrace. In early June, amidst the surging river currents, countless fish were battling the waves. However, Tristan and Mackenzie knew how much turmoil there was in their hearts, with words they both longed to speak, ready to burst forth. Not long after, Tristan returned once again, this time taking away the most beautiful girl from the branch office. They quickly began discussing marriage. Mackenzie had only one request: she wanted to buy a house. It could be small, but it had to be paid in full and registered in both of their names. During that time, the house on Maple Avenue wasn't considered expensive. Tristan, being diligent enough, and with his parents' support, quickly secured the house. It wasn't large, but it was enough to create a warm home. Unexpectedly, soon after, Tristan's father was diagnosed with lung cancer. From the county hospital to the provincial hospital and then to the capital hospital, the confusing medical jargon and symbols left people bewildered, but the cost of treatment was a glaring and headache-inducing figure. As people often say, money is like dung, but in the end, hopes for life still need to be sustained by money. Tristan's father wanted to give up. His son's life had just begun, and his wife had no pension. He wanted to leave her some retirement money. After hearing his father speak these words, Tristan went to the corridor, wiped away his tears in silence. After much contemplation, he decided to sell the partially decorated wedding house. He barely slept that night, constantly imagining Mackenzie's possible disappointment and anger. He arranged to meet her at the bustling entrance of the Maple Avenue shopping mall. He needed the cover of the crowd to utter those words. Mackenzie, wearing white sneakers and a long, narrow denim overall skirt, looked even more graceful and slender. She ran over with a smile and asked, "Did you wait long?" He shook his head, his back and palms covered in sweat. He was afraid of losing her. Even many years later, he still remembered his fear and anticipation at that moment, with a burning feeling in his heart. In the crowded mall entrance, he impulsively hugged her. In their previous phone conversations, he had briefly told her about his father's condition. So, she comforted him like soothing a child, stroking his hair and patting his back, saying, "You've suffered. I missed you a lot during these days when you weren't at home, really missed you." After a long while, when Mackenzie felt embarrassed by the onlookers and started to pull away from his grasp, he finally released his arms. Trying to calm his emotions, he revealed his thoughts about selling the house. Her soft hands, seemingly possessing immense strength, pulled him towards the mall, saying, "Sell it if you need to. Treating the illness is more important. If the money is still not enough, we'll figure it out together." His heart surged with unprecedented tenderness and sorrow. He said, "But I don't know when I'll be able to save enough money to buy a house again." Her eyes shimmered with tears, and she playfully scolded him, "Look at you. Are you in a hurry to buy a house or to get married?" If the red maples on Maple Avenue had memories, they should have remembered that young couple running hand in hand. They were full of vitality and enthusiasm, their fingers tightly intertwined, and their smiles full of joy and love when they looked at each other. As soon as they entered the house, they couldn't wait to embrace each other tightly, passionately kissing each other. Two young and healthy bodies expressed their feelings and emotions through intimacy and collision. Murmurs, moans, confessions, and calls filled the air. Tears and sweat mixed together, indistinguishable. Later, amidst the drone of an unwearying fan, Tristan softly said, "Mackenzie, rest assured, we'll have everything." Mackenzie's soft smile was like a marshmallow. He kissed her again, embracing her tightly as if holding a scared child. "You scared me. I was so afraid of losing you." It was the buying and selling of that house that sparked a bold idea in Mackenzie. The money she earned from selling the first house was borrowed from her parents. 2 months later, she sold it and bought a second one, followed by a third and a fourth. She was careful with her choices, selecting each house according to the standards of a residence. She genuinely thought about it: if she couldn't sell or if property prices fell, she would keep it for themselves. During that time, they still lived in an old building on Maple Avenue, working hard and saving money. They lived there for over 5 years, and their daughter Piper grew to be 4 years old. Their life as a family of 3 might not have been affluent, but because it was warm and joyful, they never felt lacking. After Mackenzie became pregnant, due to significant physical reactions, she stopped going to the company. Her thoughts were simple: Tristan was in a period of career ascent, and she didn't want to distract him. Moreover, arranging for his wife to return to her previous position after childbirth wasn't a difficult task for him. With these considerations, days passed by. However, when Piper was born, Mackenzie realized that taking care of this rosy-cheeked little girl was much more demanding and complex than running a business. Thankfully, Tristan's salary kept increasing, and their bank balance gradually rose. Mackenzie, having dealt with several real estate transactions, became sensitive to property prices, and during her strolls with Piper, she would visit the sales centers. For various reasons, Mackenzie gave up her career. When Tristan was at home, he was a good husband and father, doing laundry, cooking, and tidying up. He handled every household chore, and the Piper, who had just started speaking, would call him daddy over 100 times every night, almost every time receiving his tender response. When Piper started kindergarten, they had a second car, and a year later, they moved into a new house. Piper, like a newly freed dove, excitedly ran from one room to another, shouting, "Our house is so big and beautiful." When Piper turned 5, Tristan's father passed away. He saw his son's marriage, the birth of his granddaughter, and the family of 3 moving into a new house. Even his attending physician said that, considering his condition, it was almost a miracle. Tristan said that Mackenzie not only had love for him but also a loyalty and kindness that transcended everything. It was she who made his life free of regrets and remorse. She had always been a gentle and tender presence, considerate and thoughtful towards her family. Taking care of the small family went without saying. During festivals, birthdays of in-laws, and significant events with relatives in their hometown, she managed everything. In the tender moments of late night, Tristan said more than once, "I wish we could stay young together all night, but I also wish to age slowly." Seemingly a cliché, but she understood. In their over a decade-long marriage, they had almost savored all the sweetness of love. During that time, Mackenzie always believed that she and her husband had a perfect harmony of body and spirit. If there were immortal couples on Earth, they would probably look like this. Piper went to a boarding school, leaving only the couple at home. They jokingly referred to it as returning to a world of just the two of them. Mackenzie still clung to her husband. When she called him, she always dragged out the long tail of her voice, Lao Gong. He was indeed patient. No matter what he was doing, whenever she called him, he would turn to look at her, smiling and responding, On a Saturday morning, he patted her bottom, "Get up quickly, I'll show you a miracle." She refused to get up, only to hear him carefully moving something. Then, she smelled the fragrance of flowers filling the room. She opened her eyes and saw a pot of blooming jasmine on the chair in front of her. He looked proud and said, "I ran back and saw a small truck full of jasmine flowers. I thought you would love it, so I bought a pot." She smiled, embraced his neck, and pulled him onto the bed. She said, "I love it. I really, really love it." She coquettishly said, "I really, really love you." He laughed, "Don't be like this, pay attention to your health." What is love? Love is a kind of taste. After more than 10 years of marriage, she still cherished the scent in his embrace and neck, unable to describe exactly what it was. It always made her unable to resist taking a deep breath. Even during hugs and kisses, she could feel his heartbeat. The word marriage is sweet and selfless when in love, but it becomes sharp and selfish in mutual hurt. The closer the connection during togetherness, the more ruthless the tearing during separation. Mackenzie loved her husband too much. He was nearly perfect in her heart, and she trusted him completely. Therefore, she couldn't associate him with the word infidelity. Her world collapsed. She remembered morning sickness, the time when she vomited happily and loudly every day, suppressing nausea with sour and sweet sensations. However, this time, she didn't know how to suppress the nausea. She wanted to kill him. But she couldn't. All she could do was leave him, strip him away from her life. 2 months ago, Tristan went on a business trip with another male colleague. Soon after, a conflict arose within the company's management. At a crucial moment for promotion, his rival accused him of accepting a lewd bribe, providing video footage from a club as evidence. After a severe scolding from the big boss and being ignored for a few days, Tristan's position and trust were surprisingly unaffected. Frustrated, his opponent decided to escalate the situation and sent the video to Mackenzie. This move firmly trapped Tristan. He explained that it happened under the influence of alcohol, arranged by the cooperating party. He couldn't remember where he went, what he did, and claimed to have blacked out. He insisted that it was a setup, and even the big boss was willing to believe him. He asked Mackenzie, "Why won't you believe me?" Mackenzie scoffed, "Because he doesn't love you. He only wants to extract your value. He doesn't want to grow old with you." She pointed at the figure in the video, "Isn't this you? You clearly walked in upright. If you crawled, I would believe anything you say." Half a lifetime of gentleness and warmth vanished from Mackenzie. She yelled at him, "Did this happen before?" In the midst of his firm denial, her emotions were like an out-of-control train. She grabbed his collar, staring into his eyes. "Did it or didn't it?" "No," he said. She stared straight into his eyes. Later, recalling the situation, she felt like she had gone mad. She said, "Swear. Swear on your life, on Piper's life." Seeing him clench his lips and bite down on his back teeth, she shouted, "Did you hear me?" His voice was squeezed out, "Curse me however you want, but don't bring up Piper, okay?" She pushed him away, clutching his collar, and shoved him fiercely, uttering a single word, "Dirty." Tristan remained silent. He decided to endure all her emotions, withstand the beatings and scolding, even if it felt like 1,000 cuts, as long as he could keep this family. After a few minutes of calmness in Mackenzie's emotions, when he sat beside her trying to console her, she immediately exploded. She grabbed a cushion and began hitting him nonsensically. Tristan gritted his teeth, face turning red, veins bulging on his neck. Every question from Mackenzie seemed beyond his imagination. She looked at him and suddenly asked, "What kind of person is he?" He didn't react for a moment. "What?" Mackenzie sneered, "So shameless. What are you pretending for?" Tristan realized, shame flooding him like a tide. It was about to drown him. He said, "I don't know." A swift slap resounded on his cheek. Her voice, not loud or sharp, pierced his eardrums and heart, "Not knowing what kind of person he is, and yet you dared to. Are you an animal?" She grabbed his collar again, straddled him, and choked his neck, pushing him to lean back on the sofa. Perhaps she used up all her strength, her voice trembling lightly. "What did I do wrong? Why are you doing this to me?" His face turned purple, unable to utter a word. If he raised his hand, he could easily push her away, but he just looked at her with a mournful gaze. Whether it was for himself, for her, or for their home, this sense of sorrow was indescribable. Mackenzie, as if unable to believe her own actions, slowly released her grip. After a fit of coughing, he hoarsely asked, "Is it enough?" He hugged her, rested his head on her shoulder, murmured apologies, and made numerous assurances. Mackenzie's cries erupted like a sudden storm, resembling the wailing and abandon of a child. She held onto his head, saying, "What am I supposed to do? You've shattered all my dreams." Mackenzie lay in bed as if she were ill for 2 days, and then it was the day Piper would come home. She bathed, changed clothes, applied light makeup, went to the supermarket for groceries, and then sat in the passenger seat next to Tristan as she used to, heading to the school to pick up their daughter. That weekend, except for looking a bit tired, Mackenzie seemed almost unchanged from usual. Tristan deliberately found many topics to discuss. In front of their daughter, she cooperated well, not interrupting him and not creating a cold atmosphere. However, once Piper left, she placed a paper in front of him. She wanted a divorce. Tristan disagreed. He spoke a lot, reminiscing about the past, promising a future, and mentioning both families and their daughter Piper. He almost pleaded, "Think about it again." "I've thought about it carefully." Mackenzie didn't look at him. Her gaze fell on the paper filled with words. "For 15 years, I still love you very much, so I can't accept it. I tried to forget about it, but I can't. When I look at your face, I imagine you close to someone else. When I look at your mouth, I imagine you kissing someone else. Even looking at your fingers, I imagine them wandering on someone else's body. I don't want to see you every day. I'm going crazy." "That's just your imagination," he repeated countless times before. "I really drank too much. You have to know, I also have times when I'm not in control, times when I feel like exploding from pressure." His words fell like drops of water on parched earth, bringing no relief and disappearing instantly. Mackenzie shook her head vigorously, hair and tears sticking together. Like a child, she said, "No." They didn't have a mortgage, and the numbers in the bank account still looked good. Tristan voluntarily gave up the division of assets and left with just the clothes on his back. He had only one request, to save face in front of her mother and daughter Piper. "You don't need to remind me. Even if you want me to say something, I'm afraid of dirtying their ears," Mackenzie said without looking up. "I'm moving out, leaving this house to you." "No, I think. Let you stay, you stay." She became irritated again, calming her emotions before saying, "It'll be more convenient if Piper comes back or if my mom occasionally stays for a few days." Tristan nodded. In that moment, Mackenzie suddenly felt that the man in front of her was somewhat unfamiliar. She stared at him blankly for a while, noticing a few fine wrinkles at the corners of his eyes and the unfurrowed lines between his brows. Countless memories swirled, slides rapidly changing in her mind. Mackenzie absent-mindedly raised her hand, stroking his hair. Her gaze resembled that of a sorrowful and affectionate mother. She said, "I'm leaving. Take care." Tristan's emotions instantly spiraled out of control. He hugged her, clutching the fabric on her back like a child. "I won't let you go." "What about the promise of a lifetime?" "Huh? What about the promise of a lifetime?" Marriage quietly slipped away. Many of her belongings remained in the original home. Tristan often felt dazed, almost wanting to call her, asking, "Why haven't you come back yet?" In the human world of June, flowers bloomed all over the city. The summer of a city would not lose any luster because of the separation of a couple. While waiting in line at the Civil Affairs Bureau, Mackenzie absent-mindedly scrolled through her phone. In her friend circle, Jaden, who had initially entered the club with Tristan, just updated his status. His family of 4 went on a seaside vacation, with his wife leaning on him in a sexy swimsuit. There was a blue sky and sea in the distance, and 2 children's smiling faces up close, looking peaceful and happy. Mackenzie tucked her phone into her bag. Her mind was empty, thinking of nothing. Everyone has their own choices, just a matter of perspective. In the following month, they played the roles of a loving couple on weekends. When Piper wasn't around, Mackenzie's emotions were extremely unpredictable. She was tender and sometimes irritable, just like Tristan. Occasionally, their eyes met, and it seemed as if sparks were about to fly. For example, seeing her irregular meals, he couldn't help but say, "You're not a child anymore. Take care of yourself." She replied impatiently, "Are you saying I'm old?" Seeing his shirt shoulders deformed by the hanger, she said, "You can't hang your shirt like this." He sneered, "I'm a bachelor. I can hang it however I want." There were also unexpectedly tender moments. Once, when Piper talked about a classmate's campus romance, the little girl chirped, "I don't like those silly boys. When I have a boyfriend in the future, I'll use my dad as a template." Tristan lowered his eyes, his smile somewhat awkward. However, Mackenzie laughed and touched her daughter's hair, saying, "But you have to know, Dad is not a god. He may also have ordinary weaknesses and make mistakes like ordinary people. Mom is the same. If one day you find out that your mom and dad have many flaws, living with holes, remember to forgive us, live your own life, okay?" Tristan looked at his ex-wife. Her smile was gentle and calm, but it lacked the sweetness from the past, replaced by a touch of vicissitudes and weariness. They played their roles to the fullest, even sleeping in the same bed at night. Almost every night, Tristan would ask, "Shall we start again? Is it good?" Sometimes, Mackenzie acted as if she didn't hear him speaking, and sometimes she would grab whatever was at hand and throw it at him. One night, after the lights had been off for a while, he suddenly spoke, "My mom's birthday is in a few days. Will you accompany me home?" "Sure," she seemed to be in a good mood, responding, "as long as you need me. Even if she turns 100, I can still act with you. Of course, unless you've married a young and charming wife." "Nonsense," he laughed, "I'm like a pauper. I don't have the strength to build another home. Why say such pessimistic words? You're only 39. You are a rich man yourself." Tristan laughed again, and his tone had a rare lightness and teasing, "It's already been emptied by you." Mackenzie fell silent for a minute, then suddenly sat up from the bed, yelling at him, "Tristan, you have no shame." He curled up, hugged her waist, buried his face, and murmured, "No more." He held her like that, unwilling to let go for a long time. He said, "I'm waiting for you to change your mind, waiting so tired." Mackenzie rested her injured ankle for over a month, and during this time, Tristan was at her beck and call, losing a solid 10 pounds. Gradually, their emotions settled, and they started having considerate and sincere conversations. Tristan's cooking skills were decent, not bad but not exceptionally good. Despite this, he tried different recipes every day. He did the laundry, cleaned, changed the bed sheets, and said, "You used to handle all these household chores. I was always lazy back then, thinking that when I retire, I'll take care of all these chores, and you can sit beside me, eat fruits, and scroll through your phone." Mackenzie laughed, and he added, "As long as you're willing, I'll keep my word. There are some things I've wanted to say for a long time." She looked into his eyes and spoke softly. "I remember all the kindness you've shown me over the years. I remember the hardships and efforts you put into this family. The troubles and hardships in your work and relationships, you rarely mention or complain about, and I've been away from the workplace for many years, unable to empathize with you. Perhaps I've been too selfish, not caring enough about you, or perhaps the days before were too smooth, making me overly idealistic about marriage and partners. After our divorce, I often couldn't sleep at night, suddenly remembering one thing, then thinking of another. Let's not torment ourselves anymore. You are a very, very good person, but unfortunately, our fate was too short. Don't talk about this." Tristan turned away. Compared to her outbursts, he feared her calmness more. Calmly talking about separation might be the true end. "Tristan," she rarely called him by his name, "I've been in a bad mood lately. I hit you and said many hurtful words. I'm sorry." Tristan crouched beside her, saying, "I always feel like this isn't the end for us. Thank you for taking care of me." She didn't respond to his words but smiled faintly. "In this world, no one will treat me better than you. You will always be my family." Mackenzie tightly gripped the crutch next to her. "I'm tired. I want to go back to the room and lie down for a while." He stood up to assist her but was gently pushed away by her. The next weekend, when Tristan took Piper back to school, Mackenzie quietly returned to the rented apartment. She no longer cared about right or wrong. Only children argue about right and wrong, adults just need inner peace. The life of the two individuals, once fueled by the bright flames of love, was then simmered by the gentle heat of time. Mixed with a full spectrum of flavors, it resembled a pot of increasingly thick and complex soup. Even the mundane past often carried the energy of a storm, leaving her inner self perpetually restless. In front of the apartment building, there was a flight of steps. She had to lift her good leg onto the steps, support herself with the crutch, and then slowly move her injured leg up. The ordinarily short distance now made her break into a sweat. However, what did it matter? Just grit your teeth and move slowly, like the days passing by. When Tristan returned and didn't find her, he quickly located her. His expression wasn't very pleasant. He busied himself in the kitchen, making loud noises, then stormed out, only to return shortly with large and small bags, creating another round of commotion in the kitchen. The house, unoccupied for days, had collected dust, and the air was stale. He cleaned the floors, wiped the tables, opened the windows for ventilation. Everything was done with rough and heavy-handed movements, as if afraid she wouldn't realize he was angry. Mackenzie sat on a chair by the window and said, "I can take care of myself." As if he hadn't heard, she repeated, "I can take care of myself." She said, "Tristan, don't be like this. We're already divorced." Tristan walked towards her and crouched by her legs, looking up at her. This man, who had been intimately close to her for 15 years, exchanging countless sweet words, now revealed a youthful shyness and bashfulness. He asked, "Do you still love me?" She blurted out, "Yes." Seeing a spark light up in his eyes, she cruelly added, "A love as delicate as a thread, but with more hatred." The light in his eyes dimmed. How could a love as delicate as a thread withstand the hardships of a wounded life? After a long while, he asked, "Do you regret being with me?" She shook her head, "No, never regretted." Tristan stood up, continued silently with his work, then picked up the trash bag at the door and left. He didn't say a word, but the sound of his departing footsteps gradually faded away. Mackenzie felt that this time, he probably wouldn't linger anymore. She thought about sticking her head out the window to see his departing figure, but ultimately restrained herself. Autumn had arrived. Summer had ended, and the maple leaves turned red. Which day in the future wouldn't be a good day? "Let's go, don't look back," she muttered softly, but a tear still fell with a plop on the back of her hand.